This happened last February. I was 22 years old and had just finished my final semester of college. Before starting my new job, I wanted some time alone, just a quiet break to reset. So, I booked a cabin for the weekend. It was a short-term rental located just outside a small town called Norfield, about 3 hours from where I lived. The cabin was nice. It had one bedroom, a small kitchen, a bathroom, and a cozy living area. I brought along my phone, a book, and a Bluetooth speaker, just the essentials for a quiet getaway. I arrived around 4 p.m. on Friday. The place was clean and quiet. The owner had left a handwritten note with the key and some basic instructions. There was no cell service, but I didn't think much of it. That was part of the appeal. I unpacked, made something simple to eat, and spent the evening reading. Later, I played a few songs from my phone through the speaker before heading to bed. The next morning, I took a walk through the nearby woods. After I got back, I played some music while cleaning up the kitchen. Everything felt peaceful, like I had hoped it would. That evening, I was sitting on the couch. My phone was on the table beside me, and the Bluetooth speaker was still on, but I wasn't playing anything. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a strange sound coming through the speaker. It started with a low crackling noise, like static. Then a man's voice came through. The voice began counting down slowly, starting at 10. I stared at my phone. Nothing was playing. There were no apps open, no music queued. And I didn't recognize the voice or the audio at all. Confused, I turned the speaker off. I sat there in silence for a few minutes, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. At first, I thought maybe the speaker had picked up a signal from someone nearby, maybe a radio or a walkie-talkie. But the cabin was in the middle of nowhere. There shouldn't have been any signals at all. I didn't hear anything else that night. Eventually, I went to bed early. The next morning, I got up, made a simple breakfast, and tried to shake off the weird feeling. I left the speaker turned off and switched my phone to airplane mode for the whole day. I spent most of the afternoon outside. I walked a short trail behind the cabin, then sat on the porch with my notebook. Everything felt normal again. Peaceful. For a while, I convinced myself that the night before had just been some kind of glitch. Later that evening, while washing dishes, I played one of my old voice memos, just something I had recorded weeks ago as a project idea. The speaker worked fine. Nothing strange happened. I didn't play any music after that. I turned the speaker off, left it on the table, plugged in my phone, and left it in the bedroom. For a while, I convinced myself that the night before had just been some kind of glitch. Later that evening, while washing dishes, I played one of my old voice memos, just something I had recorded weeks ago as a project idea. The speaker worked fine. Nothing strange happened. I didn't play any music after that. I turned the speaker off, left it on the table, plugged in my phone, and left it in the bedroom. It was the same muffled voice from the night before, but this time, it wasn't counting. It was repeating my name. Again and again, I picked up my phone, trying to figure out what was happening. But it wasn't playing anything. The speaker was still paired, but there was no reason audio should have been coming through. Nothing was open. No apps, no files. Just silence, except for that voice. I turned the speaker off once more. This time, I removed the batteries completely and placed it face down on the table. The rest of the night stayed quiet. But I couldn't sleep. I kept waking up every hour. Checking the doors and windows, glancing at the table where the speaker lay like something waiting to come back to life. I didn't relax until sunlight started to seep through the curtains. As soon as it was morning, I got up and started packing. I had planned to stay one more night, but I couldn't bring myself to stay another hour. Nothing strange had happened after I removed the speaker's batteries, but I didn't want to wait around for it to start again. Before leaving, I walked through the cabin one last time to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. The speaker was still right where I'd left it, on the table, lifeless and silent. I wrapped it in a towel, put it in a separate bag, and loaded the rest of my stuff into the car. I kept my phone in airplane mode until I was close to town. When I finally turned it back on, everything looked normal. No strange files. No voice memos. No audio clips. I stopped at a grocery store on the way home. Before going inside, I dropped the speaker in a public trash bin outside. That speaker had worked perfectly fine for over a year. But I wasn't going to use it again, not after what I heard. I never figured out what caused that voice to play through it. No explanation for why the speaker turned on by itself. No reason why it played audio that didn't exist in any of my files. Since then, I've avoided using voice memos completely. I also keep Bluetooth turned off most of the time. Nothing strange has happened since. But I still think about that weekend sometimes, especially when I see the same model of speaker in stores or online. I never contacted the cabin owner. Honestly, I didn't know what to say. There wasn't anything they could have done. I was alone the entire time. And no one else had access to my things. This happened 2 years ago, when I was 26 and working from home in Boston. After a long, stressful period at work, I decided I needed some time alone. No emails, no meetings, just quiet. I found a small cabin in northern Maine through a local rental site. The listing looked perfect, basic, remote, and surrounded by woods. Exactly what I wanted. The owner gave me directions over the phone, since the cabin wasn't on GPS. To get there, I had to follow rough landmarks, an old wooden sign, a rusted mailbox, and a dirt road that eventually disappeared into the forest. The drive took most of the day. About half an hour before I reached the cabin, I lost phone signal. No bars. Just trees and silence. When I finally arrived, the cabin looked exactly like the photos. Small, weathered, but clean and peaceful. I unpacked, made some tea, and sat outside for a while. The air felt crisp and cool. The area was quiet, not in a creepy way. Just calm. Still. Like the world had paused. The next morning, I made breakfast and decided to take a walk behind the cabin. There wasn't a marked trail, but the trees were spaced out enough to move through easily. It felt safe. Peaceful. I followed a natural path through the woods for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. That's when I saw something in the distance. It looked like another cabin. Older. More worn down. I wasn't expecting to see anything else out there. The listing had said the area was completely isolated. Curious, I walked a little closer to get a better look. The cabin was roughly the same size and shape as the one I rented. But this one looked abandoned. The wood was gray and split in places. The windows were dark and covered in grime. It didn't look like anyone had used it in years. I stepped onto the porch to get a better view. I didn't try the door, and I didn't go inside. I just stood there, listening. Looking. There was nothing obviously wrong with the place. But something about it made me uneasy. I couldn't explain it, it was just a feeling. A kind of stillness that didn't feel peaceful anymore. I stood there for another minute, then turned around and headed back. Suddenly, I didn't feel like walking any farther into the woods. Once I got back to my cabin, I stayed in for the rest of the day. I didn't feel scared, exactly. Just unsettled. At first, I didn't think much more about the second cabin. I figured maybe it had belonged to the same owner, or someone else, a long time ago. But that night, I caught myself checking the windows over and over. Not on purpose. Just a reflex. Like I expected to see something. Nothing happened that evening. I ate, read a little, and went to bed around the same time as the night before. I woke up once, probably around 3 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't loud, but I thought I heard something outside. I stayed in bed and listened, holding my breath. Everything went quiet again. I stayed in bed, barely breathing. I didn't get up. I didn't go to the door this time. I just listened, and waited. Eventually, the stillness lulled me back to sleep. Or maybe I was just too tired to stay awake anymore. The next morning, I made up my mind. I packed my things. I had originally planned to stay for 2 more days. But I didn't feel like being there anymore. Nothing bad had happened. Nothing I could explain, at least. But something didn't feel right. It wasn't just the abandoned cabin. It wasn't just the sound in the night. It was a quiet tension in the air, like I was being watched, or followed, even though I never saw anyone. Later that week, after I got home, I went online to see if anyone had ever mentioned anything strange about that area. I wasn't expecting much, but I came across a few random posts buried deep in local forums. People talking about old cabins hidden in the woods. Cabins that looked almost exactly the same. Some mentioned a strange heaviness. An eerie feeling of being watched. One person described seeing a second cabin that wasn't on any map. I read a few of the stories, then stopped. I didn't want to go any deeper. I didn't look into it any further after that. And I've never gone back. This happened in April of last year, when I was 19 and finishing my first year of college. 2 friends from my dorm, Jamie and Liv, suggested we rent a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains for the weekend. We all needed a break. Jamie found a listing online. It was basic and in a remote area, surrounded by thick woods, quiet and secluded, which sounded perfect. We booked it from Friday to Sunday. We left Friday morning and arrived by mid-afternoon. The last stretch of the drive was all winding mountain roads, with no houses or signs of civilization nearby. The cabin looked exactly like the photos. Plain, a little old, but clean and comfortable. We unpacked our bags, made something to eat, and played cards after dinner. Around 11:30 p.m., I went outside for a short walk. I wasn't tired yet and just wanted a few minutes of fresh air. I didn't tell the others, just pulled on my hoodie and quietly stepped out the back door. There was a trail behind the cabin. It looked flat and easy to follow, so I figured I'd walk for 10 minutes or so before heading back. I didn't bring a flashlight, but the moon was bright enough to light the path. I could see clearly where I was going. I stayed on the trail, walked peacefully for a little while, and then turned around. As I got closer to the cabin again, something felt different. The lights were still on, but they looked dimmer. Like they were filtered through fog, even though the air was clear. When I stepped inside, I immediately noticed things were not the same. The kitchen was spotless. The dishes we had used earlier were gone from the sink. Our bags we had already unpacked, were zipped up and neatly placed near the door. I stood there, frozen, trying to understand what I was looking at. Jamie and Liv were sitting on the couch, chatting casually like everything was normal. They looked up and asked if I was ready to eat. I didn't respond. I just stared at them, confused and silent. I had only been gone 10 minutes. Nothing felt strange outside. But now, it was like I had stepped into a different version of the same night. They started making dinner again, just like before. Same food. Same small talk. Same card game afterward. It felt like the evening had restarted. Like it was looping. But I was the only one who remembered the first version. I stayed with them until they finished eating, then quietly went to bed. Early the next morning, before either of them woke up, I slipped out and walked back up the trail. Everything looked exactly the same as it had the night before. I stood there for a few minutes, hoping to notice something, some clue, some difference. But nothing stood out. Nothing strange. Nothing different. When I got back to the cabin, I asked Jamie and Liv if they remembered me going out the night before. Liv said she thought I had stepped outside for a moment and then come right back. Jamie didn't remember it at all. As far as they knew, I had only been gone for a minute, maybe less. The rest of the weekend was completely normal. We did a short hike on Saturday, made lunch together, played some board games in the evening, and packed up Sunday morning before heading home. Nothing else felt off. And I didn't bring up what happened again. They hadn't noticed anything strange, and talking about it would have just made things more confusing. After that, I got busy with finals. School, assignments, deadlines, it all came rushing back. I never mentioned the incident again. Neither did Jamie or Liv. Sometimes, I wonder if I imagined it. Maybe I remembered it wrong, or maybe the trail had messed with my sense of time somehow. But the way the kitchen was reset, the bags zipped and lined up, the exact same conversations repeating like déjà vu, it made it hard to believe it was just in my head. I haven't been back to that area since. Still, I think about it from time to time. Not because it scared me. It didn't feel like a horror movie moment. It was subtle. Quiet. But that's part of what made it stick. Because I still don't understand what really happened. Maybe it was small. Just a moment. But it was enough that I still remember it. I'll try to keep this short and focus only on the things that have been making me feel this way. The most recent thing happened just last night, and honestly, I didn't sleep much, so I apologize if this sounds a bit scattered. My wife and I recently bought our first home after our daughter was born. At first, everything was great. The first few months were full of excitement. We painted the rooms, decorated, did some light repairs, and just enjoyed the feeling of having our own space. It really felt like a dream come true. But then, strange things started happening. It began a few months ago. I had just finished work and was driving home. As I turned onto our street, something caught my eye, a truck parked 2 or 3 houses down from ours. There was no company logo on it. No markings at all. Just a plain, dark truck. I had never seen it before. That might not sound strange on its own, but we live in a very small neighborhood. The kind where everyone knows each other. The kind where you notice a new car right away. And here's the thing, there's no through traffic where we live. Our road doesn't connect to anything else. You don't just drive through by accident. The truck was moving, slowly. Not like someone looking for an address, but like someone trying not to be noticed. Creeping forward, inch by inch. Just slow enough that it made my skin crawl. I remember thinking something about it felt off. Really off. So I kept my eye on it as I pulled into our driveway. At that point, I still didn't know this was just the beginning. The truck kept moving, barely, like it had been put in drive, but the driver wasn't touching the gas pedal. As I parked, I glanced in the rearview mirror. That's when it suddenly turned around. Right in the middle of the street. And started driving back, toward my house. I got out of the car and stood there, watching. The truck rolled slowly past. The driver didn't say a word. He didn't even try to hide that he was staring at me. He looked straight at me with a hard, angry expression, like I had done something wrong just by being there. Then, without warning, he floored it. The engine roared, and the truck sped off down the street and disappeared around the corner. I try not to judge people based on how they look. And I don't usually get scared easily. But something about the way that man looked at me, especially his eyes, made me feel deeply uneasy. Later that evening, I told my wife about what had happened. I said we should probably start being a little more careful. Maybe double-check the locks. Keep an eye out. Just in case. When I described the truck, the color, the dents along the side, how it looked old and kind of dirty, her expression changed immediately. She went quiet for a second. Then she said, "That same truck drove past our house earlier this afternoon." When I got home, the guy inside stared at me the whole time I was walking to the front door. She looked uncomfortable, like she had been trying to forget it. "I thought he was just some creepy guy checking me out," she added. So I didn't say anything. That made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He'd driven by twice in one day, once when she was alone, and again later when I got home. That didn't sit right with me. I tried to lighten the mood, maybe to calm both of us down. I gave her a little smile and joked, "Wow, someone's a little full of herself. Not every guy on the road is checking you out, you know." She rolled her eyes, and we laughed a little. But deep down, I wasn't laughing. I didn't want to scare her. But I was scared. Over the next couple of weeks, the truck kept appearing. Sometimes it would drive by slowly, like before. Other times, it would just sit parked down the street, always facing our yard. Every time I saw it, I felt that same crawling sensation, like we were being watched. Then one day, it stopped. No more slow drive-bys. No more parked truck. It was just gone. I told myself maybe I was overthinking everything. That maybe I'd let my imagination get ahead of me. I even started to believe it. But then, new things started happening. For the past month or so, my wife and I have been hearing something strange late at night. Soft tapping on the windows at the front of the house. It's happened 2 or 3 times now, each of us hearing it separately, always when the other wasn't in the room. It usually happens around 10 or 11 at night. The sound is quiet, but distinct. Like someone gently tapping with one finger on the metal part of a screen door. If that makes sense. It's not loud. Not enough to startle you. But it's clear enough to stop you in your tracks. You know it's not random noise. The first time my wife and I heard it together was just last weekend. We were in the front room, sitting on the floor and playing with our daughter before bed. That room has a large window, almost floor to ceiling. That stretches across the wall next to the front door. It faces the street, and during the day, it lets in tons of natural light. But at night, that same window feels like a screen. Like you're on display. Like anyone outside could be watching you. That night, the 3 of us were reading a bedtime story. Our backs were to the window. Then we heard it. A soft knock. Just one. Like someone tapping with a single knuckle on metal. Our house is old. We're used to random creaks from the floorboards or little popping sounds when the temperature shifts. But this wasn't that. This sound came from outside. My wife and I froze. We looked at each other. Wide-eyed. Silent. Then we both stood up, quickly, but without scaring our daughter. I kept my voice calm and told my wife to take her into one of the back rooms, lock the door, and stay quiet. As soon as they were safe, I turned on every light in the house. I grabbed the flashlight by the door and stepped outside. The night was quiet. Still. I walked around the entire house, slowly. Carefully. There was no one there. No footprints. No signs of anyone trying to hide. Nothing out of place at all. But that feeling was still there. The feeling that someone had been standing right outside our window, watching us. That big window, it kept haunting me. Watching us. Of course, I didn't see anyone outside that night. So I tried to let it go. Tried to convince myself it was nothing, just noise, just nerves. But then something happened last night. Something I still can't explain. It was around 9:45 p.m., and we were relaxing in the living room. The house was quiet. Calm. Then we heard our daughter through the baby monitor. She was making soft noises, moving around, maybe crying a little. Not full-on sobbing, but just unsettled. I waited a few minutes to see if she'd calm down on her own. Sometimes she does. But this time, she didn't. So I got up to check on her. Just planning to rock her back to sleep. Now, this part matters. The shape of the room is important to what happened next. Her bedroom is on the side of the house, but the exterior wall forms an L shape. The outer corner of that L is made almost entirely of windows. If you stand in the doorway of the room, you can see those windows directly ahead in the far corner. In the opposite corner, there's a wooden rocking chair that faces toward the front of the house. One of the windows in that corner faces the street. The other faces our neighbor's yard. Outside, there's a small garden bed that runs under the windows. It's lined with short bushes, low to the ground, nothing tall. I sat down in the rocking chair, holding my daughter in my arms, gently swaying. The lamp beside us was on, giving the room a soft, warm glow. After a few minutes, she started to drift off again. Her breathing slowed. Her little hand curled up against my chest. I stood up carefully, ready to place her back in the crib. That's when I saw something. Something just outside the window. In the narrow space between the bushes and the wall of the house, just a few feet away, there was a figure. I didn't look long enough to see every detail. But what I did see still chills me. A man. Standing still. Wearing a light gray hoodie. He was just standing there, on the other side of the glass. Watching. I ran out of the room instantly, clutching my daughter. My heart was pounding. I didn't even stop to look back. I brought her into our bedroom and handed her to my wife. I told her to lock the door. She looked confused, almost panicked. She didn't know what was going on yet, but she listened. Then I moved fast. I turned off every light inside the house and switched on all the exterior floodlights. I grabbed the flashlight from the hall and started checking each room one by one. Every window. Every door. Peeking out into the dark. But I didn't see anyone. Whoever it was must have bolted the second they realized I saw them. And that was it. After that, it was hard to sleep. I stayed up for hours, going through our home security camera footage. I spent most of the night walking from room to room, checking the cameras, peeking out the windows. Part of me wanted to see something, anything, that could explain what I saw. But another part of me was terrified I actually would. This morning, after barely sleeping, I went outside to check the spot. The exact place where the figure had been standing. I wanted so badly to believe it was just my imagination. That maybe I'd seen a bush, or a shadow, or a reflection in the glass. Something harmless. Anything but a real person. So as soon as the sun came up, I went out to the side of the house and stood in front of that window. And what I saw made my stomach drop. Right in front of the glass, there was a clear patch of ground. About 2 feet wide. Perfectly flat. No plants. No shadows. Just bare earth. Exactly where the figure had been. There was no way I mistook it for a tree, or a branch, or anything else. That spot was open. Exposed. Anyone standing there would have had a perfect view into the room, straight through the window. Straight at me and my daughter. I stood there for a long time. Just staring at that empty patch of dirt. Trying to make sense of it. Trying to calm my thoughts. Telling myself over and over that I was just tired. Just paranoid. Because it's easy to imagine things in the dark, especially when your body's exhausted and your mind's on edge. And that's how I've been lately. Worn out. Between taking care of our daughter, dealing with the stress of everything, and barely sleeping, I feel like I'm unraveling. But even with all of that, even with the doubt and the exhaustion, This doesn't feel like something I made up. Not anymore. It feels like too much to ignore. A part of me is still trying to stay rational. Trying to believe this is all in my head. But deep down, I know what I saw. I know someone was standing there last night, watching us. And I keep thinking, if they were that close once, what's stopping them from coming back?